legendary marketer and the son of a more legendary marketer, honestly, but great in his own right. I just figured I would ask you a few questions, about marketing yourself in music and any other strategies. I'm part of his Halbertising group, which is really good. A lot of strategies. I started it I think as soon as it began. Was that maybe 6 months ago when you started?
March actually, and and we have not allowed anybody else in. So you are part of the first and only group. We might start again. We might start allowing people in eventually, but really, what I wanted to do was make sure we gave everybody a lot of value.
Excellent. Yeah, and for sure you definitely have been. I've been doing copywriting for about 3 years in addition to my music, and yeah, then everything hit the fan with COVID, so it's like, okay, now I got more stuff to focus on. So yeah, maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your upbringing, which is pretty awesome.
Okay, well, most marketers will give you the I was sleeping in my car story, but I can't obviously do that. I was actually grew up as the feet of one of the world's greatest copywriters of all time. But more than just being his son, he was actually actively teaching me. There are a lot of children of legendary copywriters, but I was actually, even out of the kids in my family, I was pulled aside and taught how to do marketing and how to think like a marketer from the age of about 10, 11. And so I was pulled out of school to go to meetings with people like Jay Abraham and top list brokers. I was flown all over the country and internationally to, attend meetings to see how they would go and how they'd work. I eventually started working in the family business and doing a lot of client relations stuff. But the singular focus that I had, all of Gary Halbert's proteges, and I was probably the first, got a really in-depth lesson in one particular field. And since I was there and watched all of them get it, and my dad liked to repeat himself ad nauseum, I would, get all that they got about research, or get all that they got about offers, or all that they got out about deals, and copywriting and headline writing and all that. But we all ended up really with one singular, okay, this is the magic sauce for all of us. And for me, it was the big idea. So that's became my forte. And then I was working and doing my own stuff privately, nothing in the world of teaching people direct marketing or anything like that. And then when my father passed away, people wanted to interview me, and I gave them interviews, and they wanted to ask questions about my father. But inevitably, they'd realize that I knew a heck of a lot more than somebody who just knew him. And so then eventually they started asking me questions about how I accomplished this thing that everybody was trying to accomplish and couldn't, or how I did that. And I gave a few speeches on stage, and it ended up, it took me a long time, believe it or not, to realize that one of the things I got really down well was understanding how to teach people, because my father, I'm watching him, I not only had all the lessons, so by the time he was teaching people, I'm focusing on how he's teaching them, and I would see the lessons evolve and get refined over the years. So I could not only give you the Gary Halbert lessons and protege experience, but I could actually give it to you faster, and I actually found ways to improve upon it eventually. So, I mean, he still gets credit for it because he's the one, he even used to say that, I get credit for anything you do well because I taught you how to think. And so he would still even get credit for that, and I would give him credit for that. And I just, what ended up being that I started teaching some people copy through books or through courses or through mainly speeches and books and things like that. And people were like, wow, I can do it, but I can't teach it the way that you do. So I ended up becoming kind of like a direct marketing instructor, but I've always been a consultant and a big idea guy that helped craft the ideas behind one of Agora's biggest winning campaigns. Actually, several of Agora's big campaigns, but one of them was a record that broke all the records. I ended up being the guy who solved a lot of people's problems with that. And, it's a good mix of tried and true, stuff, that information that you would know if you had spent 40 years in this business. and another good sprinkling of, oh, that's a unique idea and a cool new tactic. What made you think of that kind of a thing? So that's my background. But it's not that I'm super smart or super special or anything like that. I think anybody who had been given that kind of intensive training since they were a kid, there's a famous story about a golfer who was playing golf for like 20 years, and he goes out to play golf with somebody who I guess is an amateur but doesn't rank, and he sees the professional golfer hit the ball straight down the fairway, like 300 yards every single time, and he says, "That's amazing that you could do that." And the guy said, "I've been spending 8 hours a day, 20 years of my life doing it. It'd be amazing if I couldn't do it." And so I don't want you to give you the idea that it's been a very hard, it's been a very earned kind of talent or way of skill. It's not something that was like I was just born with it. It was more like I was given the gift of being trained by the best and being surrounded by the best and the best idea men. And because I was a little kid when it started, I wasn't starstruck by people. So there are other people who will come around, and you'll see some famous person say, "You should do this." And it's terrible advice. And you'll see somebody who's not famous say this, and it's great advice. And I was able to judge advice based on the advice, not on the fame of the person who was giving the advice. And so as a result, I ended up being a lot more of an independent thinker than people who would just follow somebody. And often, being this long, my brother especially and I will be like, "Okay, yeah, well, he or she got that from this other person." But they're kind of passing it off as their new idea. But anyway, that's enough about me. I answer the question when people ask about me, but what are your questions? What do you want to know about marketing? I'll help you with anything you need.
Oh, for sure. Well, before I get into that, first, I will mention there's definitely a few similarities between your experience and like musical families. Like some people just have that training from day one. They're brought up into it. One of my friends, he has a dad who's a drummer who ended up playing for Santana, and of course he's also a great drummer because he was dedicated to it and had the training too. So I mean, yeah, of course there's always some innate talent, there, I guess, with music and marketing, in my opinion. I mean, you got any thoughts on that?
I think that's 100% true, but my experience is more true with being connected with the way that you grow up in a musician family than most people are growing up in a marketing family. The reason is, you're cruising around, going to an Airbnb. If your dad takes you along to Orlando for a conference, you're spending your time at Disneyland while he's actually doing the conference. Mine, I was actually going to the conference. I was actually doing that. So in the marketing world, there are a few people who are trying to do that now. But I totally, that is 100% true about the musicians, because you grow up with hearing music all the time, loving music. Your parents get you instruments. They start doing it. Very few people are handing their children pens, legal pads and papers and saying, "Okay, give me 100 headlines." How would you sell this? In fact, what happened most of the time was I'd be in the room where a client was pitching my father, and I'd be guessing in my head, okay, from hearing what the client said, this is what he's going to come up with. And this is what the headline's going to work. And eventually it got to be really close. In fact, I remember there was one time I was particularly proud. My brother had this product and he wanted to market. And it was new at the time. And he said, what would you do with this and everything? And he gave me all the information about it. And I told him what I would do. But he swore me to secrecy. But the reason he swore me to secrecy is he wanted to get independent thoughts. He didn't want like me and me to just agree with my dad or my dad to agree with him. So one day, as always, I spoke with my dad nearly every day, and I called him. I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm working on this project for your brother." I said, "Oh, what'd you tell him to do?" And he told him to do exactly what I told him to do. And since it wasn't the average, like, how do you increase the lifetime value of a client kind of question, or what else would I tell him? And it was not one of his standard, what we call like the 20 standard answers that Gary Halbert would give. That's when I knew that I was thinking like him, and that, it solidified my, like, okay, I'm doing the same thing that the master would. But I think it's great that you mentioned that, because I never really thought about it. It really is like growing up in a musician's family, except the difference is, my father's actually showing me chords, just like a musician's father showing you chords on a guitar or chords on a keyboard or something like that. And so, anybody who's been playing, the earlier you get it, the more you get it on a core level, the more you know, and it's also like anything else that you master. You learn all the rules, and then eventually when you make your breakthrough, it's because you learn exactly when it's okay or improves to break that rule. Mm-hmm. And that's basically true in most industries, like even fashion or, music or copywriting and things like that. And you get that earlier, the earlier you start getting into it. Like if you can learn languages at any age, but after 13, it's nearly impossible to learn it without an accent. You need to learn, if you're going to learn Spanish, you have to learn it by 13. Otherwise, you're going to sound like an American speaking Spanish or an Australian speaking Spanish. And it's the same thing with, almost anything else. And I think musicians were that way. And I do think, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's kind of like the way that it's different for me than it is for most people because I was doing it before 13. So you get it on a cellular level. You get it on a much more, I was stunned that I had done a couple of things that were breakthroughs in direct marketing, like writing the first book on editing copy ever written. My entire life, I've heard people like, Ogilvy used to say, I'm not a great copywriter. I'm a fantastic researcher and a terrific editor. I've heard everybody say, not enough, newbies are not putting enough time into editing. Nobody ever explained how to do editing. And so when I put out the book, I was like, wait a minute, am I really the first? And then, I was able to adapt my dad's his physical APAL, BPAL speech for mail into actually getting higher open rates in email. And before, nobody was able to actually correlate the fundamental principle of understanding how people sort their mail or sort their email the way that he fundamentally. They were all thinking it just applies to snail mail. And I was able to take that and then start increasing email. And now the entire industry is kind of like, echoing what I had originally thought. And it's not, again, it's because I was taught so early that I got it at that level that a musician gets when a musician starts early. I will never be able to play like Wynton Marsalis. It's not possible. You got, 40 years of catch up.
Exactly, yeah.
No, so that is a very good analogy on your part. I always say, because most people, like, if their dad's a famous surgeon, it doesn't mean they're taking their children into surgery to teach them. But I think I'm going to start saying it's like a musician who's a great musician like Carlos Santana teaching his kids when they're earlier than he was and giving them guitars and showing them. So
man, well, I'm glad I made that connection. I'm pretty honored. Well, aside from the honor of just having you here, but in terms of a segue, I guess there's a definition of, I don't know if it was marketing in general or just salesmanship that you had that was really good. It's basically making somebody want something enough that they're willing to give you what you want in return. Was that specifically for sales, or how did you use that definition?
I actually use it, marketing for me, I consider marketing skills to be anything that where interactions where you want another human being to do something. Mm-hmm. So if a lot of people will apply that to dating, but I apply it to everything. I would be able to go into the DMV and get things out of the DMV that other people couldn't get. And they were, that's like a hard test, and what I had realized is I went into the DMV one time, and my car I bought it brand new, but I brought it back and drove it around with paper plates for a couple years. Okay. And because it had to be, otherwise I was going to end up paying all these taxes on it and stuff like that. And I just should have paid it, but I didn't need to. The car was brand new. It was, nobody was pulling me over. When I was younger and I had long hair and drove crappy cars, I get pulled over. People would say, you fit the description someone we're looking for. I'm like, really? You're looking for somebody with a ponytail driving a piece of crap yellow station wagon? What are the odds? Right? But as soon as when I had my first brand new car, I had short hair, my glasses on and everything. It was like, I get away with murder. But anyway, so eventually I go to register the car, but I have no proof that the car is mine. And I had no things. And so what I did was I walked into the DMV. Oh, let me turn that off. I walked into the DMV. And I asked myself, what is it these people have that they're tired of and everything? And I said, what the problem is everybody's yelling at them because they're disrespectful, and then other people are trying to be all super nice, and then some people are crying and all this other stuff. I walked in, I was like, you know what? I'm going to give them the chance to be my hero. I'm reframing that. And I would say, the thing is, most people, if you turn around and say, oh, you should see this movie or you need to see this movie, most people are just like, well, no, I don't. That actually turns them off. It's a lot easier to turn around and say, oh, I saw this movie. It was great. Everybody's talking about how fantastic it was. But you don't say you should. Then they might be more interested in it. And they're sometimes even more interested in it because you go, oh, no, I don't think you'd like it because it's kind of arty, And they go, well, wait a minute. What, you think I don't like art, right? And they almost want to, prove that you're wrong. So I would walk in and I would say, I've got this problem and it's very complicated and I don't think anybody can help me, but I figured I might as well give it a shot, listen, I understand this probably cannot be done at all. Right. So I'm not attacking them. I'm not, I'm respecting their authority. I'm not begging. I'm not crying. I'm basically walking in and then they're giving them the chance to actually be my hero. And that lady was like, oh, you know what? This is no problem. Just take this paper, sign it here, do it this way, do it that way, And a few minutes later, I'm walking out with the registration in my truck. Right. And, and I did, So, but anyway, going back to the lesson, understanding other people and being their shoes and with enough empathy to understand this is what would make them happy to give me what I want in exchange for what it is they want. And that's everything. That is, getting your kids to do your homework. That is, everything like that. But marketing, we mostly associate that on the professional level with a business transaction. Now, I myself, most people will make the mistake and they will start marketing like a musician may be marketing to their fans, but they're not doing the proper marketing to the club or to the venue, or they're not doing the proper marketing to the list that they want, or they're not doing the proper marketing to a listener versus an attendee. You have to be doing that kind of marketing as well. And so, I use marketing to even get other marketers. We were doing an all-star audio series where we had the world's best copywriters reading an issue of the Gary Halbert letter. And Gary Benzavinga had retired and was like, you couldn't get him to come out of retirement for anything at this time. And I wrote him an email and I said, listen, we've got all these names. They're all the top copywriters in the world and the top direct response marketers. And I said, the one thing that I want is my dad had a massive amount of respect for you. In fact, and I told him a story about my dad's respect for him. And then I said, so what I've done is, I don't know if you're willing to do this, but if you are, I've reserved his best and most respected newsletter for you to read. And he wrote back, he's like, how could I say no to that? And he did it. And he did a great job, by the way. It was like, we heard his track and my brother and I went and like, okay, we got to up our game. We went and re-recorded ours, right? It was that good. But I was marketing to him. Now, it doesn't mean that it's unethical. Everything I said to him was absolutely 100% true. And it was just that instead of saying, hey, would you do this for me? I knew that these are things, information that if he knew it might make him more willing to do it. Okay, so marketing doesn't need to be, it's not unethical if you're not lying about something and you are, and the truth is even with the DMV, I wasn't lying. I wasn't sure if I was going to ever be able to get this thing done. It was like, really, this might be too difficult. So, for me, marketing is whenever you want another human being to do it, and just, you can use persuasion skills. But the number one, I would say there's so many different skills that go into being a great marketer, but one of the biggest ones that you can have is an understanding and empathy for the other person and understanding their point of view. And that's by understanding your own point of view. When somebody tells me, hey, you need to see this movie, the first thing I'm thinking is, no, I don't. And I think what would make me want to do something, that's like the very first question I ask myself. I put myself in the shoes of the prospect and I say, what would make me want to choose, Bond over somebody else? What would make me want to do this over somebody else? What is it that I don't want to do this? And that is the big problem most marketers have, is they naturally assume that what they write is great, what they write is genius. They cannot turn around at something that they wrote 3 pages on, rip it up and throw it away and say, this is garbage, I got to start over again. They have a hard time doing that. And they make another fatal mistake is they go to their wife or their mother or their best friend and they say, hey, would you read this and tell me what you think? And the truth is they read the whole thing out of obligation to you. Whereas somebody else in an email who doesn't know you is just like, oh, close, this is boring, close, this is boring, moving on to, something more relevant to their life. And so you have to be able to have that kind of optimism that you can do it, but jaded enough to say, this, my stuff stinks right here. I got, this has to be redone. And so oftentimes you're like, okay, that line would have sucked me in. And so I'm going to use that line, when you're writing copy and stuff like that. So
I think I remember the example of your dad just going to a bar and showing his ad to a bunch of people and like just saying like, okay, if they said, wow, this is really well written or this is really good copy, it's like, oh, trash. And it's like, but if they're like, hey, I want it, where do I buy this or how do I get this? Then he knows it's good. So I guess that applies a lot to musicians too, like whether you have like tracks that you want to show someone or like convince a club owner to hire your band and pay you more kind of thing, or if you just want other musicians to like kind of check out your stuff and be part of your project, like that might be
but here, you know what? Actually, I'm going to give you some insights right here. I think for when it comes to club owners and musicians, you want the listener to turn around and say, hey, can I get a download of that? Where can I get download? Do you have a listing on Spotify? Do you sell vinyl records of your thing? Do you have a CD that I can grab? That's what you want them to say. The club owner is not actually going to be, is not the same as a listener. The club owner is not turning around. Okay, so let's walk in the shoes of a club owner. What's the number one thing a club owner wants?
Oh, they want people in their club, buying drinks, maybe buying food if there's food, and sticking around, having a good time, and bringing their friends.
Exactly. So let's suppose you're a great musician. You're just fantastic. You're actually, Carlos Santana's son, and you've got his skill, but nobody's really heard of you. You're kind of a breakthrough. And you come and you say, hey, I'd like to play your gig on Friday. I'd like to play a gig in your place on Friday night. But I come in and say, hey, listen, I'd like to play a gig on Friday night, and I always, I have a loyal fan base of 500 people that will come in for sure. Which one is the club owner going to take?
Probably the one with the fan base.
Yeah, he's going to say, okay, Mr. Santana, I just can't do Friday because I got Bond coming in here. So, how about Saturday or the next Friday? You may get in on Santana's name. But, unless you say, I'm also bringing my dad with me, you don't lose it. So your marketing to the club owner is different to the marketing for that. Now, let's suppose that you're a musician. What's the one thing the musician wants? The musician doesn't care if the people listening to their music drinks, and they don't care whether they show up to your event someplace else. They need, what is it they want? And so, you've got to imagine that. Then you've got to create and show and prove to them that you can give them what they want in exchange for what you want them to do. And it's really, I don't think it's usually not that difficult. Even under COVID restrictions, and the greatest thing about times when they change, marketers turn around, especially if they've been around for a long time. The marketers will turn around and say, this is an opportunity, but what's an opportunity to do what? And they will turn it into an opportunity. So there are all these things that are going on that, and for the most part, your business is either A, doing really well, like in COVID, nurseries and, backyard equipment, playgrounds. These are the things that are doing super well as people are staying home more and working on, gardens and, remodeling their houses, all of those things. Nurseries right now are seeing better business than they ever have, ever. Okay. And it makes sense. So what you've got to do is you've got to learn how to scale and mass produce and get your name to a position where when COVID finishes, nobody can catch up to you. So somebody starting a little nursery is the person looking for plants sees that there's two nurseries in the neighborhood, but one of them's like 6 acres big with more plants than, it's got a listing of over 1,700 different varieties of plants, while the other one is like a, small, tiny little shop, right? And so then you can start competing on price or whatever. But the point is that you've taken the opportunity during COVID to reinvest those profits in scaling bigger and become more dominant in the workplace. The other possibility is that your business is absolutely that it's taken a hit, but it's not dead. So what you need to do is you need to pivot and figure out where your USP, where you kind of set off in. But you're usually in an industry where everybody else has messed up too, and so what you can, or is in a similar situation. So
really quick, Bon, could you just explain what a USP is for people who aren't aware of it?
It's unique selling proposition is what makes you stand out better than someone else. It is what makes you provide your service better, faster, more efficient, cheaper, higher quality, gives you more, as John Carlton says, would, give you more prestige, or, why people want you versus somebody else. What makes you stand out? What makes you different? And so with a nursery, it could be, I would, because there's always you can turn a lemon into a lemonade. So somebody else says, well, we got 1,794 plants. You say, yeah, that other nursery is really giant, but none of the people have the time to actually look over your garden project the way that we will and say, this is the one that will go well with you. They just, they're so busy, they're just point and say, yeah, the cacti are over there. Whereas we, you get much better, customer service for that. And yeah, you might pay $1 more per plant, but it's better to do that than it is to find out in 20 years that your precious plant was overgrown by the other one the guy didn't tell you about. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of expert knowledge is better. You can turn around and say, we throw in, and we have these special deals where, they're not going to tell you. Even a lot of people don't know that there's a different fertilizer that works well with different plants, and they just kind of, they point you in the direction of the fertilizer and they don't tell you about it. We have this, there's actually a thing called zones, even in California, where in the city of Los Angeles, the plants have specific zones that they'll call it. This is like zone 6, zone 7. And that tells you what plants thrive in that environment. And once you know the plants that thrive in that environment, what kind of fertilizer and how often they need to be watered. So, when you come to our place, we give you all that information on a card, which they don't bother to because all their plants are being shipped in from somebody else. Anyway, so those would all be examples off the top of my head of what would be a USP, right?
Well, really quick, it just kind of making me think, like, what could a musician use? Like the way I'm thinking of it is maybe a perceived weakness, kind of you frame it as a strength. Like if you're a smaller band that's not as popular, if you don't have a huge fan base, you're like, hey, well, we treat our fans really well, or we.
Well, like, first of all, it's really not. You know what? It's not a weakness to be a smaller band, believe it or not, because there are so many people who loved, what they love to do is they love to say, I was a fan and I used to go see these guys before they were big. I used to see U2 play in this bar in Ireland, right? Before they were famous, and now they've got a story to tell the rest of the world that they love. I grew up in LA, so there's all these places where, I knew musicians like the Guns N' Roses guys came from my high school. I wasn't a fan of their stuff, by the way. It was just, and I'm not pretending I was. But there also, there's a guy who I did know a little bit, and he's in the Wallflowers and stuff like that. And they used to do jam sessions at this one little place. And to be honest with you, I was drinking in this place, and then all of a sudden it became crowded with people doing these jam sessions, and I was like, oh man, like kind of ruining my little place here. And it wasn't that, it was just like all of a sudden it was, hard to come in and get a drink because I loved drinking at the time. So, but my point is there is a large group of people who likes indie bands, and they, as soon as you go, big, they call you a sellout. And then there's always the people who what they really want to do is they want to be into a band that's going to be big. So that's one of the ways that you can frame it, which is to check these guys out while they can. Their skill sets and their thing, they're warming up, but they're going to be big. And you'll be able to say, I remember when I was able to see XYZ band, in a small venue. So it's like kind of like come see them before they're playing in a stadium and you need binoculars. That's the kind of message that you're sending with them. That these guys are on fire and so forth. And so that's a USP for a band. But that's done by the promotion of it. The thing about the bands are you either like the music or you don't. And so more importantly to a USB is this Dixieland jazz? Is this because the thing is, you would turn around and say, it's so hard to find, new music, new good jazz that's in the style of Charles Mingus, or it's really hard to find good new rock and roll that's in the style that harkens back to the early days of U2 or whatever it is. These are like the new versions of these, right? And if you do that with enough respect and everything, I wouldn't be saying, this is the new U2, you might be violating a trademark, but you can say those kinds of things that, in the reviews, like, this is like in the style of so-and-so. Because what most people generally know is what kind of music they like. And the problem is once they really, I am very eclectic in my taste. If you go through my Spotify, you're going to see jazz, classical, rock and roll. You'll see messages from every different decade. And I mean, it goes all the way back to the 30s. I'll read a book in World War II and I'm listening to like 1940s music to match, in the background to do it. I really, really eclectic. Everybody says they're eclectic, but I really am. I've got reggae. I've got all of these different things. But for the most part, for a mood or when I know I want something, there's a specific type I like. And most people are very specific. Like, I listen to music, but it's only heavy metal. I listen to music, but it's only jazz. Or I listen to music, or it's only a certain kind. And then once you're in that field, it's really hard to find the new stuff that you like, unless you're saying that you like pop, because then, that's the only thing that they're always coming out with something new is some pop rock and some, and some hip hop. Rap. But for the most part, if you were into 70s style rhythm and blues, if you were into 1930s jazz or big band jazz, you are, you're stuck looking for new stuff to listen to. And, you wouldn't even know where to find it if you did. And so that becomes also a USP as well. So, depending on, where your genre is and stuff like that. Now, where you are, I would also be, you're tying it to memories because what's happening is a lot of people are on vacation and they, they're only going to spend 4 or 5 days down in, in New Orleans. So when they do, they're, they remember drinking, down in Key West, we drink rum runners. I don't know what you would be drinking specifically in New Orleans, but.
Well, I mean, people drink everything, but there's, I guess, like some of the famous drinks are like the Sazerac and, a couple other things that are known for like old New. In fact, I was going to ask if you or your dad or Kevin have spent any time down in New Orleans at any point.
I think my dad did, but not a lot of time. I think he had been there, but you know what? Kevin went through Louisiana one time on the way back from Florida, but not me. I definitely did not. But actually, the funny thing is, out of the three of us, I'm the only one who's actually a jazz fan. The only two stations that I listen to are a jazz and a classical station in my car. I still listen to rock and roll, but that's always on my Spotify. I don't like all the commercials and everything else. So the two and jazz and classical like more mellow me out in LA traffic. So
yeah. So I guess another thing like. So I kind of remember the exercise you had us do where you look at, features and benefits, but then you also have, like, benefit of the benefit and emotional benefit of the benefit. So it's like, hey, like this is some 1930s jazz or it's done in the style of 1930s jazz because, that's what'll help you relax, in these situations, and that's what our band does. Would that be kind of a good like
Yeah, well,
USP for a band?
I think, well, it depends on the genre. If you say big band, you know, I
A
would
little more
I
active.
wouldn't say as much as relaxing as energizing. I would probably go with the emotions that go with that. Energizing you to, that helps you, look forward to your day, when you turn that on and you got the Monday blues. But and then once they actually like your music, the trick is just getting them to actually take the action you want. So here's some questions I have for you. Let's suppose that you got a what is it that you want them to do? Come to your club, get on your fan base list, or buy an album, or buy a CD, or what?
Well, kind of all those things. We usually have a front man. One of the bands I play with called Sabertooth Swing, my friend Dan, is really good at working the crowd, so it's pretty much just like having some witty banter in between, talking a little bit about the history of the song and all that. But towards the end of the set, we definitely say, oh, hey, we're going to walk the tip jar around and get people to throw in a few bucks, but we're also carrying the CD. So ideally, they'll buy some CDs, and maybe one of the records, because we also have vinyl records, which kind of helps because it's like generally older style jazz that we do in this particular band. So I'd say those two things. We haven't really pushed the mailing list too much, but that could definitely be another thing to get them to keep listening. But like we do have some stuff on Spotify that's getting plays, and it's on a few bigger playlists.
I would, if I was you, well, because something's on a playlist doesn't. Okay, here's the problem that you have with being on Spotify or something like that, which is people. You would think, okay, somebody says, oh, you know what? I really like that band. What's the name of your band?
This Sabertooth Swing, you just pull it up on Spotify.
Okay, hold on. So, Sabertooth Swing. Swing, I get it. So what would happen all the time is you'd say, you naturally think, and this is your mistake, you would naturally think somebody would go, hey, that was a really good song. Let me look at it. Oh, that's Sabertooth Swing. Let me go look at what their other music is. Let me go check on the Google and see if they got a website. They don't do that because they don't think about it. You can never in marketing rely on people to have a thought that's logical. You have to give it to them all the time. Okay? So I'm not saying to not be on Spotify, because being on Spotify is kind of like, proof that you've arrived. Most garage bands aren't on Spotify, right? And they don't make somebody's big playlist. So what I would be doing if I was you for sure is building a funnel for fans. And I would definitely be, I would be handing out cards, like you can just get them printed on business cards, and all they do is they have your web address, and then your USP is say we have a hot new release that's only available on our website. It's the only place you can get it, listen to it. So you're playing the bands and stuff like that. You've got a set, and there's a and I would offer them and say, if you like that last song, you can get a free copy of it through our website, download the MP3. Plus, we also have, a couple bonus tracks that are only available through there. That gives them a reason to go and get onto your list.
Yeah.
Once they are onto your list, that's when you can segment and find out, okay, which are the people who are local. And you would tag them. You would say, these ones are local, and so they're the ones who are going to get announcements when we play a new gig and COVID stops and we open up and we go, hey, we're going to be playing at this so-and-so stuff. Come on by. And if you do, mention the site or something and find something to actually give to them, something free. I mean, if could be a beer cozy. It could be, to keep it cool. It could be whatever. You just always in your mind, like when you're going around and seeing things and doing things, what is it that you can do? Now, at some point, what I would do is I would say, you would sell T-shirts, and you say, listen, buy the T-shirt, because if we see you wearing the T-shirt while you're at one of our concerts, we'll buy you a beer, right? Okay, so and that's good. That's good for each, and we actually tell the bar owner that we're footing the bill, and you tell the bar owner that, because here's the deal: who buys one beer? Nobody. right?
Good point.
Okay, so you say, listen, if they come in and they're wearing this T-shirt, you take down their name, right? So now you know who are your hotspot customers, right? These are things I'm just thinking of the top of my head. But what you do is you say, you buy the T-shirt, and actually, if you come to our gigs and you drink beer, it's really free because after you've been to 4 of our gigs, you paid more money than you would have paid for the beer, for the T-shirt, and get 1 domestic or 1 tap beer. And then you go to the bar owner and you say, hey, listen, I can bring, we normally bring in, but there will be about 50 guys in T-shirts. And when they come in, you give them 1 free beer on tap, one of the smaller ones or whatever it is, because that's cheap and inexpensive for the bar owner to provide. And that'll get them juiced up and rolling. And then what we're going to do from the stage, now here's the thing you do at in the stage. You make a star that night out of the manager and the bartenders. You in the middle of the set, not at the end, we'd like to thank you for, the guys at the Boar's Head Club, allowing us to play and everything. You say, hey, I want to throw a special shout out to my man Andy, the manager who's, hooking the people up, who's handling all of our fans with the shirts. And, and so forth, and Joey behind, or, Michaela behind the bar who's, little heavy tipping with the the thing. But the point is, you make the bartender and the manager love you and have a good time, and they see that they're doing good business, and they see that your crowd loves you, and they see that your crowd is, not disruptive and rowdy or crazy or anything like that, and sticks around, then you're doing great. And then when you say, hey, listen, we're going to take a break. Buy another beer right now because, we're going to be back in a second, and you're not going to want to get up and leave in the middle of this next set. Right, so you're selling to the. You understand now we're marketing to the club, right? To get you to come back, right? So the whole point is that if you're a band and wherever you play, you've got 50 people who will show up in T-shirts at any club that you want and spend the night drinking for you. You find it much easier to get those gigs, right? Sure. And so, you definitely want a funnel. And then what you do is when you have that list, you have power. You can say, hey, we're doing this on Spotify. I want you to listen. You know what? And you can do the Facebook thing that I used to do, which is, look, if you've got a friend who's into swing, that person has other people who are into swing, even if it's just one. Like, oh, this person enjoys it too. It's one of the things we have in common. So what you do is you say, let's say you got a bumper sticker, right? Or something, and you're going to send it out to free to anybody who who shares your page and your music, but also shares the hashtag Sabretooth, right? So now they're kind of advertising to the other people. And, so when you post, so when they share your song on, on Sabretooth or your Spotify list or whatever it is you want to push, they're not only looking at increasing the stats on Spotify, they're also increasing your exposure to it from other people. Now, what I would be doing right now is the other third group of people that we never talked about with business are the ones who have to kind of retool or completely shut down for a period of time. Now, musicians are in the second group, which is we can start playing bands again once COVID is over, right? So you're trying to find a way to survive and do things now, but you want to increase your exposure, increase that funnel, increase that exposure or all of that other stuff going on now, because what'll happen is, when it comes out and there's, they're done, the one that the COVID reopening New Orleans band they're going to see is Sabretooth. So some of the things that I would be doing in those things would be looking at, there's a Facebook group and that's called, let me see what it was, Jazz Vinyl Lovers. There is, it's like quarantine karaoke, right? Where you guys can actually, from all over the country, they're a gigantic following. You could actually play a song on there, right? That's what it's about. And the problem is most other people have, they don't have the rights to the background music for the stuff that they're singing. You guys, you own your stuff, right? It's yours.
I mean, we do a lot of covers, but yeah, if we did come up with like, something with the same chord structure, but change the title or change the lyrics, like, yeah, it could become our own song in that way.
Yeah, and if you're doing covers, you say we're such and such, this is, you know, you could do a lot of covers, but like, there's one band that I saw that like I will go out and see, and it's I think it's Dead Man's Party. It's a cover band for Oingo Boingo because Oingo Boingo is not around anymore, right? And so they are, I mean, and they got a guy who looks like Danny Elfman too, but it's the closest thing I can get to the fact that I missed seeing Oingo Boingo before they broke up, right? And so that's their USP, and wherever they play and when they do those things. The other thing I would think about doing is to get the exposure. Now, and this is the way it works. What you want to do is, you throw you can say it's for charity, but it's also free. Anybody can show up. Throw a concert festival online. And what that means is you get the other bands who have lists and of 100 people or 500 people or whatever it is, and you get them all to show up for the festival. And you're each going to be playing some gigs or something. And you could do it in the other things that I would start tagging would be like famous musicians' birthdays that you're doing it specifically on that. Like this is Louis Armstrong's birthday. So, if you put in hashtag Louis, and this link, we're going to, let you in. But you have to, what I would do is say, when you're doing it on your Facebook and all the bands and they say, we're going to be playing this festival, we want everybody to show up, create a website for the festival, not Sabretooth's website, but a website for the online COVID Jazz Festival, right? Because people can't make it to New Orleans, right? Because of right now. And then what you would do is at the very top of it, come on in and we will email you the Zoom link, right? Now you've got the email list of all these jazz bands, all these jazz, you've collaborated all the list of all the other festivals. And then you help them with it too, because now, the truth is you're not going to come up with a new song once every week, right? And, when the other bands come out and say, hey, we want to, give a shout out, so-and-so's just finished this new release, we want to know what you think or whatever, you can give a shout out to the other bands that helped you do this in the festival. So everybody's winning.
Yeah.
A lot of people make the mistake in thinking that other bands are your competition. They're not. They're allies. Nobody's got one copywriting course on their shelf. Nobody's got one jazz album. Nobody's got, one thing. And you start billing things through that website and you say, hey man, you guys need to check out Sabretooth while they're still playing the small gigs because I guarantee you they're going to blow up. These guys are hot. You know what I'm saying? Then you're bringing in the whole, the local hometown band. And I would even play up, any angle you can, which is, this one's for locals only. When you want to escape the tourists and, go actually listen, because you are a real Louisiana jazz fan, come check out Sabretooth. They're playing at the Boar's Head over on, 9th Street, on so forth. But building that list and getting exposure is the thing to be doing now until you can open up, right? And then, of course, there is going to be, I don't know about you, but Los Angeles, we are more locked down than any county in California, but I'm only an hour away from a county which is much more open than I am. So if I had a band here, I could actually take it to that place where it's got a good marketplace. And so if I was doing jazz, right, I could take that band up to Santa Barbara where the population skews a little older and, and do really well with it there. And, and so, I mean, there's that opportunity as well. But what you need to be doing is once you figure out like, vinyl sales, and you can cut deals with the sites, and by the way, that's the guy who owns the vinyl, who runs the vinyl group, you say, hey, we'd like to get an announcement of our new album and everything, would you take $200 to do it? And you remember that trick I mentioned earlier about sending somebody a check?
Oh, no. I don't remember that.
So what you do is you say, I don't know if you do this or not. Another group I know that did do this. And if you make this post with this link and you make it an announcement for 1 week, I've enclosed a check for $100, and it's a valid check. And, if you don't do it, I understand you can just rip up the check. But if you do it, if you want it to, just cash the check, post my thing up for a week and cash the check, and then you'll have, mark it as an announcement, right? And so the hardest thing for people to do is to give back cash that they actually have in hand. And you think, well, nobody's got checks anymore. That's not true. People now, they have the apps that take a picture of the check and they can deposit it like that. So what happens when you have groups, and that's one of those powerful techniques. Like if I wanted to really play a specific club, right, and I wanted the band to book me, I would actually send him some money and say, listen, I know your normal take is this. I'm going to bring in these fans and everything like that. The normal rate for all the bands is, $500. I know that you pay $500 a night for it. Actually, I'm willing to spend, here's $100 right now so that you know that if you take us, you're only paying $400. Or you can send me that $100 check back, or you can rip it up. People don't want to do that. But the point is, what I would do is get people in the other Facebook groups that are jazz aficionados. You can pay for ads to run as announcements in those groups. And then that's going to give you more exposure. That exposure drives them to your website. You give them some great free music. You start building your list. And then you build a following of people by recommending other jazz bands that they like and stuff like this. Now, this is all predicated on the fact that you're good. So don't, if it doesn't sound good, you can't blame me for that.
Exactly, yeah. But in terms of just going back to the funnel for people who might not be quite familiar with it, so basically you'd start out with an opt-in form, right? And should it have, ask for their address right away, or should that be kind of on the next step after they what you should do is you should provide samples of your music on the thing, and then but it should be you can either do it through streaming S3, where it's very hard for them to kind of download it and get a high quality version, or you do a 68K rendering so they can hear it on their computer. And you say, but, sign up for free and we'll send you a full-blown, MP3 with much higher quality sound, right? And, a few more of our tracks, 6 tracks. And then, following my principles, you say, but, be sure to enter an email. A lot of people get mad at us was when we announced that we have, sometimes we have these limited deals, like when we did our T-shirt deal or whatever it was, that, and you say, so be sure to enter a primary email address you check often, because sometimes we get these gigs last minute, and as soon as we open up and as soon as we're allowed to play our first gig, we know we're going to pack the house, or we think we're going to pack the house. And, and we'd like to reserve so whenever we do this, we always reserve 100 tickets for our closest fans. And so, but they go quick. So be sure to enter a primary email address you check often, so that when we send that announcement, you won't miss out. And so they put in the primary email address, they get a couple of your tracks, then you send them and you say, hey man, we really want to thank you for checking it out. We love jazz swing lovers. It seems like, how it is where it's so hard to find some, new music that's in that genre that you really love and everything. We do too. So we're working on a new album with new stuff, so it's not just covers. And, love to get your feedback on what you think. Join us here at our Facebook fan page, and put in the links and stuff like that. And so then what you want to then do is create the different contact information. So you have an Instagram to follow, right? Which is picture of, Johnny messing around on the bass to, with a new lick that he's thinking of adding to his new song, while Alex is writing lyrics down if there's lyrics involved. So you have the behind the scenes look through the Instagram. You also have the Facebook following, and you have the Facebook page.
You have your email contact. So if any of these things ever get, lost or undone. The other thing I would do is I would look at your Google sniff test. So look at what a band on Google has. So what you would do is you would create a YouTube channel for your band. That's you playing some gigs. So hopefully you got some old footage and this is the time to do this, right? Before you're actually busy playing gigs, right? During the downtime. So put up some of your old footage, and say, this was from from our very first gig, and see how much we've progressed since then. And, build on the theme that this is a growing in popularity. The human being has got a fight or flight instinct. And so we're always thinking that, if we see something running, we either run away from it because it's going to kill us like a bear, or run after it like a rabbit looking for food. And that genetic, disposition is still going, where people are like, oh, these guys are starting to grow bigger and everything. I want to become a fan while I'm still one of the first fans. So then so you have some YouTube videos of it, some pictures, get on some podcasts about other things that, where the band's doing some podcasts that are about music or about jazz. And do what you can to make sure that when people check it out, they're like, oh, wow, that's a real band. Look, they're on, they got YouTube videos, they're on podcasts, they've got their own website, they've got Facebook page, they're on this festival. They don't know that it's your festival. They're like, headlining this festival that they did online. They, they're listed as bands playing from the websites from these other venues, places that you played before. And just make sure that the entire, when people type Sabretooth Jazz or Sabretooth Jazz Band, that the first half just makes it look like you guys are a rocking good time that a lot of people love. And then this all grows because eventually, it's a picture of a whole bunch of people with Sabretooth Jazz T-shirts, in front of the stage, having fun while, you're rocking out. I would also be doing when you do that thing, say, hey, you're all on Facebook Live right now, and start scanning the audience, in your, to your Facebook page and your Facebook group, because, people, there's a lot of people who love musicians, and one of the things they love about it is the fame. They love that, they're famous things. And, we could go on for hours about it, but, you can do a profile on each band member to make up content for for the Facebook page or for the Instagram thing. But again, this is all predicated on making sure that the music is tight and good, that you are, that it is, you're building your following, you're building your list, and then at one point you are, even before you can, if you've got actual vinyl, show up the vinyl and post that picture on the jazz vinyl lovers, thing, group, and say, one of my favorite cover bands, I especially like track 5 or, whatever, the remake of Stan Getz's, famous song and things like that. But build your funnel, and the funnel starts with, here's a reason to go to our website, which is to get some free tracks and free downloads. The signing up is to get more of that goodness and higher quality stuff. The list is to, keeps them engaged, keeps them interested in just remembering who you are, right? And then once they remember who you are, you can then start retargeting them with, the Google Display Network. So they see your names everywhere, and they're like, wow, that band is really blowing big. I see ads for their gigs that they're going to be playing coming up in the next couple of weeks. And you just target, let's say, the people in Louisiana, right? Or the people in New Orleans area. So you geo-target that, right before you're going to, in that list, right before you're about to start playing at the Boar's Head, and you make that ad look like this weekend playing, one of the first ones to, be heading at Billy's bar is going to be, the Sabretooth, jazz band, and so, now their experience is, wow, this is, they are growing, and, and hopefully they jump onto it. And then, when they're there, you treat them really well. Special shout out to everybody who's wearing our, our super fans who are carrying the T-shirts and stuff like that. If you want one, they've got them at the back and everything like that. And, start growing from there.
Excellent. Man, well, we went for about an hour. That's some phenomenal information. I'm really honored that you're willing to spend this time to talk about this. And yeah, it'll be really helpful towards the music community in New Orleans. I'm thinking right now to start building that up. And is there anything you'd like me to say? Like, I guess the Halbert website with an S is where you have a lot of your products for marketing and copyright.
They can do that, but you know what I would really like more than that is send me jazz. I actually really like jazz. So
awesome.
And I like classical and I like rock. I just send me some of that. And then the other thing is think about a charity that they can all do as a festival that helps. Find a local bar that's been super supportive of jazz that's super struggling and thinking that they might shut down as a result of it. And get everybody together, create that festival website, and then throw the festival and take donations. No donations too small, and say we're raising $10,000 because we really don't want to lose our local clubs. And because if we do, the only thing we're going to be left with is the joints that are filled with tourists. And we don't want to do that. And then, promote that on the Nextdoor app and promote that on, any place where you can get a free voice somewhere, and save a local jazz club. And what's going to happen if you actually end up saving a local jazz club? They're going to love you.
Right about that. Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, take a look at what's going on there with the local jazz clubs. I mean, I think everybody in the French Quarter is for sure going to be fine. I mean, these, they were getting rich off of this positioning that they've had for years. But there's always, because I lived in a small, tourist town, I know that there's some really hot places that are just 2 blocks away from the French Quarter that are hurting a lot more and are less likely to be able to reopen.
Yeah.
So go do that.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much again.
You're very welcome.
We'll send you our tracks.